The red dust of Mars swirled outside the massive glass windows of the Galactic Defense Coalition Recruitment Center. Inside the building, hundreds of beings from across the galaxy filled the waiting areas. Some had 4 arms, others had blue, skin that sparkled like stars. A few floated in the air without touching the ground. They all wanted the same thing, a job on the newest and most important ship in the Coalition fleet, Commander. Zektar walked through the crowds with his 4 arms crossed behind his back. His crystalline skin caught the artificial light and threw rainbow patterns on the walls. He was looking for pilots, but not just any pilots. The new ship needed someone special, someone who could handle technology that most beings had never seen before. The quantum drive system was so advanced that it scared even the best pilots in the galaxy. In the far corner of the main waiting room, a human woman sat alone. Her name was Kate Bishop, though nobody had paid much attention to her application yet. She wore old clothes, a brown leather jacket that had seen better days, and simple blue pants. Her brown hair was pulled back in a ponytail that looked like she had done it herself that morning without looking in a mirror. While aliens around her spoke in excited voices about their flying experience and showed off their abilities, Kate just sat quietly and read through the forms she needed to fill out. The other candidates were impressive. The Mindari could read thoughts and predict what enemies would do before they did it. The Nexus had computer chips in their brains that let them think faster than any organic mind. The ethereal dancers from the far side of the galaxy could move through space like they were swimming through water. All of them had flown the most advanced ships their species had ever built. Kate finished her forms and handed them to the reception desk. The clerk, a tall alien with too many eyes, barely looked at the papers before putting them in a pile with hundreds of others. Kate walked back to her seat and waited. She did not talk to anyone. She did not try to impress anyone. She just waited, like she was sitting in a doctor's office. Hours passed. Names were called. Candidates went into testing rooms and came out either smiling or looking defeated. Some aliens left the building entirely, knowing they had failed before the results were even announced. Kate watched it all happen, but never changed her expression. She looked calm in a way that made some of the other candidates nervous, though. They could not say why. Finally, her name was called. Kate stood up and followed a guide down a long hallway to a room where 3 people sat behind a metal table. Admiral Thorne was human like her, but he wore a uniform covered in medals and ribbons that showed he had seen many battles. Science Officer Velanash looked like a giant insect with 6 legs and eyes that glowed green in the dim light. Chief Engineer Rodriguez was also human, but his hands were stained with oil and his uniform was wrinkled from working on machines. All day, Admiral Thorne looked at Kate's application and frowned. The paper showed that she had only flown small aircraft on Earth, nothing in space, nothing with quantum drives, nothing that went faster than the speed of sound. He looked up at her and saw a woman who seemed completely ordinary. Miss Bishop, he said, your application shows very limited experience. You have flown crop dusters and small passenger planes. This position requires piloting a ship that travels through 11 dimensions of space. The quantum drive creates conditions that have driven experienced pilots insane. Are you sure you want to be here? Kate looked at him without blinking. Her voice was steady when she answered, I can fly anything that moves. The 3 interviewers looked at each other. Science Officer Velanash made a clicking sound with her mandibles that meant she was skeptical. Chief Engineer Rodriguez tapped his fingers on the table and studied Kate's face like he was trying to solve a puzzle. Miss Bishop, Velanash said. In her translated voice, the pilots we are considering have decades of experience with quantum navigation. Some have flown through black holes. Others have survived temporal storms that exist in folded space. What makes you think you can compete with that level of skill? Kate was quiet for a moment. She seemed to be thinking about how to answer. I have been flying since I was 16 years old. I have never crashed. I have never been lost. I have never been afraid. Admiral Thorne leaned back in his chair. There was something about the way Kate spoke that made him pay attention. She was not bragging. She was not trying to impress them. She was just stating facts like she was reading from a weather report. The quantum drive system, Chief Engineer Rodriguez said, creates navigation conditions that are impossible to describe to someone who has not experienced them. Space and time bend around the ship, up becomes down. Distance becomes meaningless. Most pilots need years of training just to survive their first quantum jump without losing their minds. You're saying you can handle this with no training at all? Kate nodded once. Yes, the room was quiet for several seconds. Outside, they could hear the sounds of other interviews taking place, other candidates being tested. Admiral Thorne made a decision that surprised even himself. "We will give you a chance in the simulator trials," he said. "If you can pass the basic tests, we will consider your application. But I want you to understand, these tests eliminate 95% of all candidates. Beings with centuries of experience fail these tests. Are you prepared for that?" Kate stood up from her chair. For the first time since the interview began, she almost smiled. "When do we start?" The three interviewers watched her leave the room. After the door closed, they sat in silence for a moment. "What do you think?" Admiral Thorne asked. Science Officer Velinash clicked her mandibles again. "She is either completely delusional or she knows something we do not." Chief Engineer Rodriguez shook his head. "There was something about her. Did you notice her hands? No tremor at all? Most people shake a little when they are nervous. She never moved." Admiral Thorne looked at Kate's application again. Something told him they had not seen the last of Kate Bishop. Something told him she was going to surprise them all. The Coalition Testing Center was a massive room filled with simulation pods that looked like metal eggs. Each pod contained enough computing power to create entire universes inside holographic displays. The tests were designed by the best military minds in the galaxy, and they were meant to break candidates who were not good enough for the most dangerous job in space. Kate followed the technician to pod number 47. Around her, other candidates were already climbing into their assigned simulators. She could hear alien languages being spoken in worried tones. Some candidates were doing breathing exercises to calm their nerves. Others were taking pills that would help them think faster during the tests. The technician was a young, human man named Danny who looked like he had been working too many hours. He helped Kate into the pilot seat inside the pod and began attaching sensors to her arms and head. The sensors would monitor everything about her body during the test: her heart rate, brain activity, muscle tension, and even how much she was sweating. "First test is navigation through an asteroid field," Danny explained as he worked. "Sounds simple, but these asteroids move in patterns that do not make sense. They change direction without warning. Some of them phase in and out of existence. About 60% of candidates pass this one." Kate nodded and settled into the pilot seat. The controls looked nothing like anything she had ever seen on Earth. Instead of a steering wheel or joystick, there were floating panels of light that responded to hand movements. The main display showed three-dimensional space in a way that hurt to look at if you stared too long. "Second test," Danny continued, "introduces temporal distortions. Time moves at different speeds in different areas of space. What feels like a minute to you might be an hour in normal time, or it might be a second. This one breaks a lot of minds." "Maybe 30% pass." Kate tested the controls carefully. She moved her hands through the light panels and watched how the simulated ship responded. It felt strange, but not impossible, like learning to ride a bicycle after years of walking. "Third test," Danny said, and his voice got quieter, "is the quantum maze. I have been working here for 3 years, and I have only seen 12 candidates complete it successfully. Most people come out of that test different than when they went in. Some need therapy, some quit flying entirely." The pod door began to close around Kate. The last thing she saw was Danny's worried face looking at her through the small window. "Good luck," he said. The asteroid field appeared around Kate like she had been dropped into the middle of a cosmic storm. Massive rocks tumbled through space in all directions. Some were the size of buildings. Others were small enough to fit in her hand but moved so fast they would destroy any ship they hit. The simulation was so realistic that Kate felt like she could reach out and touch the asteroids. She began to fly. The ship moved through the asteroid field like it was dancing. Kate's hands flowed over the light controls in smooth motions that looked almost like she was conducting music. She did not fight against the movement of the asteroids. Instead, she seemed to predict where they would go and moved her ship into the empty spaces before the asteroids even got there. In the observation room above the simulator pods, Admiral Thorne watched Kate's progress on a large screen. "Commander." Zektar stood beside him with all four arms crossed. Other Coalition officers gathered around as word spread that something unusual was happening in Pod 47. "Her flight path is perfect," whispered a navigation specialist. "She is not just avoiding the asteroids. She is using their gravitational fields to increase her speed." Kate completed the first test in 8 minutes. The average completion time was 23 minutes. The second test began immediately. Space around Kate's ship began to change in ways that made no sense. She flew into an area where time moved slowly, and everything became thick and heavy like swimming through honey. Then she emerged into a pocket where time moved so fast that asteroids appeared and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Most pilots panicked during this test. The human brain was not designed to handle time moving at different speeds. Candidates often became confused about which version of reality was correct. Some started seeing things that were not there. Others forgot how to work the controls entirely. Kate flew through the temporal distortions like they were not even there. "Run a full medical scan on her," Commander Zektar ordered. "Check for cybernetic implants, genetic modifications, anything that might explain this performance." The technicians ran every scan they had. They looked for computer chips in Kate's brain, artificial enhancements to her nervous system, drugs in her bloodstream that might improve her reflexes. They found nothing. According to every test they could perform, Kate Bishop was completely and totally human. "Impossible," muttered Science Officer Velanash, who had arrived to watch the tests. "Humans do not have the spatial processing abilities to navigate temporal distortions this effectively." Kate completed the second test in 15 minutes. No candidate in Coalition history had ever finished it in less than 40-5. The observation room fell silent as the third test began. The quantum maze was not just difficult, it was designed to be impossible for most minds to comprehend. The simulation created a space where normal physics did not work. Up could become down without warning, distance had no meaning. A ship that was a mile away could suddenly be inches from your face. The maze existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously. Most beings could barely understand 3 dimensions. The few who could handle more than that usually needed special training that took years to complete. The test was designed to find the one pilot in a million who could navigate through folded spacetime without losing their sanity. Kate's ship disappeared into the quantum field. On the monitors, her ship appeared as a small dot moving through. A representation of space that looked like abstract art, lines bent in directions that had no names. Colors existed that should not have been possible. The path through the maze changed constantly, requiring the pilot to make split-second decisions based on information that contradicted everything they thought they knew about reality. "She should be completely lost by now," Admiral Thorne said quietly. "The maze reconfigures itself every 30 seconds. Even if she memorized the path somehow, it would not help." But Kate was not lost. Her ship moved through the impossible geometry of the quantum maze like she had been flying through folded space her entire life. She turned left when up was the logical direction. She accelerated when stopping made more sense. She followed a path that existed only in dimensions that most beings could not perceive. 17 minutes after entering the quantum maze, Kate's ship emerged on the other side. The observation room was completely silent. Every officer, technician, and specialist stared at the monitors in disbelief. Kate had not just completed the quantum maze. She had set a new galactic record, beating the previous best time by more than 2 hours. The pod door opened and Kate climbed out. She looked exactly the same as when she had entered, calm, unremarkable, slightly bored. Her heart rate had never gone above normal. The sensors showed no signs of stress, confusion, or fear. Danny, the technician, stared at her like she was an alien creature he had never seen before. How do you feel? He asked. Kate stretched her arms over her head like she was waking up from a nap. Fine. When do we leave for the ship? The GDC Horizon was the largest ship ever built by the Galactic Defense Coalition. It stretched for 2 kilometers from nose to tail and housed 8,000 crew members from 47 different species. The ship was humanity's contribution to the war against the Devourers, alien creatures from outside the galaxy who consumed entire star systems like food. Kate Bishop walked through the corridors of the Horizon, carrying a single bag with her personal belongings. Her quarters were on Deck 12, Section C, Room 847. The room was small and plain, with just a bed, a desk, and a small window that showed the stars outside. Kate unpacked her few possessions, some clothes, a few photographs from Earth, and a stack of old magazines about something called barnstorming. Other crew members watched her as she settled in. Word about her impossible performance in the simulator tests had spread throughout the ship. Some aliens whispered that she must have cheated somehow. Others wondered if she was a secret weapon that humanity had been hiding. A few simply could not believe that a human could outfly candidates who had been piloting spacecraft for centuries. Kate ignored the whispers and the stares. She reported to the bridge for her first shift and took her place at the pilot controls. The Horizon's quantum drive system was more advanced than anything that had ever been built. The control panels covered 3 walls and displayed information in languages that most beings could not read. The navigation computer required input from 17 different sensors, just to calculate a basic course change. Captain Martinez was the ship's commanding officer. He was a veteran of 12 campaigns against the Devourers and had scars on his face that told stories of battles he had survived. He looked at Kate with suspicious eyes when she arrived for duty. "Bishop," he said, "I have read your test scores. They are impressive, but test scores do not win battles. Out here, one mistake can kill everyone on this ship. Are you ready for that responsibility?" Kate sat down at the pilot station and began reviewing the ship's status displays. "Yes, sir." The Horizon's first mission was to escort a supply convoy to the Kepler sector, where coalition forces were building a defensive line against the Devourer advance. The journey would take them through normal space for most of the trip, but the final approach required a quantum jump past a massive black hole that bent space and time around itself. For the first 3 days, Kate flew the ship through normal space without any problems. The Horizon moved in formation with 12 other vessels, maintaining perfect distance and heading while traveling at speeds that would have seemed impossible to humans just a century earlier. Kate's flying was smooth and precise, but nothing that other experienced pilots could not have done. The crew began to relax. Maybe the human pilot was not as special as the test scores suggested. Maybe she had just gotten lucky in the simulators. Then they reached the black hole. The massive gravitational field twisted space around the Horizon like a funhouse mirror. The navigation computers began showing error messages as they tried to calculate a safe path through the distorted space-time. Automatic systems started failing one by one, as the ship's sensors could not make sense of the contradictory information they were receiving. Captain Martinez studied the sensor readings and frowned. The standard protocol for this situation was to return to the nearest coalition base and wait for a specialized navigation ship to escort them through. The delay would cost them at least 2 weeks, and the supply convoy they were protecting desperately needed to reach its destination. "Captain," Kate said quietly from the pilot station, "I can thread it." Martinez looked at the displays showing the twisted space around the black hole. The gravitational fields were so strong that they could tear the Horizon apart if they made even a small mistake. The quantum effects near the event horizon created navigation conditions that had destroyed ships before. "Bishop, this is not a simulation. If you miscalculate our trajectory, we could be pulled into the black hole or lost in folded space forever. Are you absolutely certain you can navigate through this?" Kate's hands were already moving over the quantum navigation controls. She began shutting down the automated systems one by one, taking manual control of the ship's movement through space. I will not miscalculate. The bridge crew watched in fascination as Kate worked. Her fingers danced across controls that most pilots needed months of training to understand. She made micro-adjustments to the quantum field generators, while simultaneously balancing the ship's momentum against gravitational forces that changed by the second. The horizon began to move through the distorted space around the black hole. On the main display, the stars stretched and bent as space-time itself twisted around them. Other ships in the convoy fell behind, unable to match the horizon's impossible course through the gravitational maze. Kate flew the massive battleship like it was a small fighter craft. She rolled the 2-kilometer vessel to avoid gravitational eddies that would have crushed smaller ships. She accelerated into areas where physics said they should slow down, and she found paths through the twisted space that did not appear on any sensor reading. The journey that should have taken 6 hours was completed in 2. The horizon emerged from the black hole's influence exactly where they needed to be, 3 days ahead of schedule. The rest of the convoy would not catch up for another week. Captain Martinez stared at the navigation displays in disbelief. Bishop, what you just did is impossible. Those gravitational fields should have torn us apart. How did you know the ship could handle those stresses? Kate looked uncomfortable with the attention. I could feel it, sir. The ship, I mean. I could feel what it wanted to do. Science Officer Velanash had been monitoring Kate's brain activity during the flight. She approached Captain Martinez with a concerned expression on her insect-like face. Captain, her neural patterns during navigation show readings we have never seen before. It appears that she is processing spatial information through some form of quantum entanglement with spacetime itself. Word of Kate's impossible navigation spread throughout the ship. Crew members who had been skeptical of the human pilot began to look at her with a mixture of respect and fear. She had done something that should not have been possible, and she had made it look easy. Kate returned to her quarters after her shift and sat by the small window, looking out at the stars. She pulled out one of her old magazines and read an article about pilots from Earth's past who had performed at air shows, flying dangerous stunts in primitive aircraft just for the joy of flying. The magazine was full of pictures of old airplanes and stories about pilots who had pushed the limits of what was possible. Kate studied the photographs and remembered a time when flying had been simple, when the only navigation she needed was to follow railroad tracks and look for familiar landmarks. On the ground, a soft chime indicated that someone was at her door. Kate opened it to find Captain Martinez standing in the corridor. He looked tired and worried. Bishop, we need to talk. The crew is asking questions about what happened today. Some of them are scared. They want to know who you really are and how you can do the things you do. Kate invited him into her small quarters. Martinez looked around at the sparse furnishings and the stack of old magazines. These are about barnstorming, he said, picking up one of the magazines. Ancient aircraft from Earth's past. Why do you have these? Kate sat on her bed and was quiet for a moment. My brother and I used to fly those kinds of planes. We performed at county fairs and air shows across the American Midwest. Nothing fancy, just flying because we loved it. Martinez sat down in the room's only chair. What happened to your brother? Kate looked out the window at the stars. Pete died in a crash 2 years ago. I should have died too, but something happened during the accident. Something changed. When I woke up in the hospital, I could see things differently. Space, time, movement, it all made sense in ways it never had before. She turned back to face Martinez. The doctors said I had brain trauma, that I was experiencing hallucinations. So I pretended to get better and I never told anyone what I could really see. I came out here because I thought maybe in space it would make more sense. Maybe I could be useful instead of just different. Martinez studied her face. Kate, what you did today saved us weeks of travel time. But more than that, you navigated through conditions that should have killed us all. The crew needs to know. They can trust you. Kate nodded. They can trust me, Captain. I will never let anything happen to this ship or the people on it. As Martinez left her quarters, he wondered what other impossible things Kate Bishop might be capable of doing. As the Horizon traveled deeper into the war zone, Kate's abilities became more obvious and more impossible to explain. She navigated through cosmic storms that disabled other ships' sensors completely. She piloted the massive vessel through spatial anomalies that veteran navigators could not even map on their computers. She consistently performed maneuvers that violated everything the Coalition knew about physics and pilot psychology. The crew watched her work with growing amazement and fear. During a particularly difficult passage through a nebula filled with quantum interference, Kate flew the ship by instinct alone. All the navigation computers were useless, showing only static and error messages. Other ships in their convoy became lost in the swirling clouds of gas and energy. But Kate guided the Horizon through the maze like she had detailed maps of every particle in the nebula. Chief Engineer Rodriguez cornered Kate in the mess hall after that flight. He was a man who had spent 30 years designing and fixing spacecraft, and he understood better than most what should and should not be possible. "Kate," he said, sitting down across from her at the small table where she was eating alone, "I need you to explain something to me. During that nebula transit, you flew this ship through gravitational shears that should have torn us into pieces. You made course corrections that our computers said were impossible. How did you know the hull could handle those stresses?" Kate looked uncomfortable with the question. She poked at her food and did not meet his eyes. "I just felt it, Chief. The ship told me what it could do." Rodriguez leaned forward. "Ships do not talk, Kate. They are machines made of metal and circuits." "What do you mean when you say the ship told you?" Kate was quiet for a long moment. Finally, she looked up at him. "When I am flying, I can feel the ship around me. Not just the controls and the displays, but the whole structure. I can sense where the stress is building up, where the metal wants to bend, where the energy fields want to flow. It is like the ship becomes part of me." Before Rodriguez could ask more questions, alarms began sounding throughout the mess hall. Emergency lights flashed red as the ship's speakers announced that Devour scouts had been detected nearby. All crew members were ordered to battle stations immediately. Kate ran to the bridge and took her position at the pilot controls. On the main display, 3 enemy ships appeared as dark shapes against the stars. The Devourers built their vessels from materials that seemed to absorb light itself, making them difficult to see and even harder to target. "All ships, this is Horizon," Captain Martinez announced to the convoy. "We have 3 Devourer scouts closing on our position. Maintain formation and prepare for combat." The enemy ships moved in ways that defied logic. They accelerated without visible engines, turned without banking, and seemed to exist in multiple locations at the same time. Their weapons fired beams of energy that twisted space around them, making it impossible to predict where the shots would hit. "Evasive maneuvers," Martinez ordered. Kate's hands flew over the controls. The Horizon, despite being 2 kilometers long and massing as much as a small moon, began to move like a fighter craft. She rolled the massive battleship to avoid enemy fire, diving and climbing through 3-dimensional space while keeping perfect formation with the smaller escort vessels. Around them, the bridge crew stared in amazement as Kate flew the ship through maneuvers that should have been impossible. She anticipated enemy fire before the Devourers had even aimed their weapons. She found weaknesses in their formation that the tactical computers had missed. She kept the Horizon intact through a running battle that should have destroyed them. Twice over, one of the Devourer ships launched a quantum torpedo that created a bubble of twisted space-time around itself as it traveled. The weapon was designed to be impossible to avoid. It existed in multiple dimensions, simultaneously, and could strike targets that were not even in the same area of normal space. Kate saw it coming before the sensors did. She threw the Horizon into a spiral that bent the ship's superstructure to its absolute limits. The quantum torpedo passed through the space where they had been just seconds before, its reality warping field missing them by mere meters. "Impossible," whispered the tactical officer. She avoided a quantum torpedo by visual navigation alone. The battle lasted 20 minutes. When it was over, all 3 Devourer scouts had been destroyed, and the Horizon had not taken a single hit. The convoy had not lost a single ship. In the aftermath of the battle, Kate returned to her quarters and found Science Officer Velanash waiting for her. The insectoid alien was holding a datapad covered with readouts and charts. "Miss Bishop," Velanash said in her translated voice, "I have been monitoring your brain activity during combat and navigation situations. The patterns I am seeing are unlike anything in our medical databases." Kate sat down on her bed and looked at the datapad. The charts showed brain scans that looked more like abstract art than medical readings. "During combat," Velanash continued, "your neural activity shows quantum entanglement patterns. It appears that your consciousness is somehow directly interfacing with the fabric of space-time itself. This should not be possible for any known form of life." Kate handed the datapad back to her. "I told Chief Rodriguez and Captain Martinez already. Something happened to me during an aircraft accident on Earth. After I recovered, I could see things differently." Velanash made clicking sounds with her mandibles, which indicated deep thought in her species. "Miss Bishop, have you ever considered that you might not be entirely human anymore?" Before Kate could answer, Captain Martinez entered her quarters without knocking. He looked angry and confused. "Kate, I just received a message from Earth Command. They ran a background check on you for security clearance purposes." He held up a datapad of his own. According to official Earth records, Kate Bishop died in an aircraft accident 2 years ago. The small room became very quiet. Kate looked at both of her visitors and realized that her secret was finally coming out. "Who are you really?" Martinez asked. Kate stood up and walked to the small window that showed the stars outside. "I am Kate Bishop. I was born in Montana, on Earth 26 years ago. My brother Pete and I used to barnstorm across the American Midwest in old aircraft. We performed at county fairs and air shows because we loved flying more than anything else in the world." She turned back to face them. 2 years ago, we were practicing for a show when Pete's engine failed at low altitude. He tried to save the plane, but we crashed in a field outside Kansas City. Pete died on impact. I should have died too." Martinez and Velanash waited for her to continue. "When I woke up in the hospital 3 days later, everything was different. I could see space and time as if they were physical objects I could touch. I could sense the movement of everything around me, not just big things like planets and stars, but tiny things like quantum particles and energy fields." Kate sat back down on her bed. "The doctor said I had severe brain trauma and that I was hallucinating. They wanted to keep me in the hospital for months of treatment. So I pretended to recover normally, and I never told anyone what I could." "Really see, but why did Earth records show you as deceased?" Martinez asked. Kate smiled sadly. "Because Kate Bishop did die in that crash. What woke up in the hospital was something new, something different. I came out here to space because I thought maybe I could find a purpose for whatever I had become." Velanash studied her with compound eyes that could see into spectrums of light that humans could not perceive. "The quantum entanglement patterns in your brain suggest that you have somehow merged with the fundamental structure of reality itself. You are not just human anymore, Kate. You are something that has never existed before." Captain Martinez sat down in the room's only chair and rubbed his forehead. "Kate, what you are describing sounds like science fiction. But after what I saw you do today, I am starting to believe that impossible things might be possible after all." Kate looked out at the stars again. "Captain, we are heading toward the biggest battle this galaxy has ever seen. The Devourers are not just attacking our ships and planets. They are attacking reality itself. If we are going to stop them, we are going to need every advantage we can get." She turned back to face him. "I do not know exactly what I am now, but I know what I can do. I can fly through spaces that do not exist, navigate through time that moves backwards, and see paths that lead to victory when everyone else sees only defeat." Martinez stood up. "Then that is what we will need you to do." The final battle began at the edge of the galaxy, where normal space started to break down under the influence of Devour technology. The Coalition had assembled every available ship from dozens of worlds, over 3,000 vessels representing centuries of military tradition and the combined knowledge of 47 different species. Kate stood on the bridge of the horizon and watched the enemy fleet approach on the tactical displays. The Devourer Armada was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Their ships were not just vessels traveling through space, they were weapons that attacked the very nature of reality itself. Around their massive world ships, space-time twisted into impossible shapes that hurt to look at. Admiral Thorne had taken command of the entire Coalition fleet from the Horizon's bridge. He studied the sensor readings with growing concern. Their reality distortion fields are larger than our projections indicated. Any ship that gets too close will be torn apart by dimensional shearing. Captain Martinez nodded grimly. Our weapons will not be effective beyond the distortion boundary. We need to get close enough to target their world ships directly, but our navigation systems cannot function in twisted spacetime. Kate listened to their conversation while running pre-flight checks on the Horizon systems. She could already see what was going to happen. The Coalition fleet would try to approach the Devourer ships using conventional navigation, but they would become lost and confused in the reality distortions. Most of the pilots would panic when up became down and distance became meaningless. Ships would collide with each other or simply disappear into folded dimensions. Admiral, Kate said quietly, I can guide the fleet through their distortions. Thorne looked at her with skeptical eyes. Bishop, those reality fields extend for millions of kilometers in all directions. Even if you could navigate through them, how would you coordinate the movement of 3,000 ships? Kate walked over to the main tactical display and studied the patterns of the approaching enemy fleet. To everyone else, the Devourer formation looked like chaos, ships appearing and disappearing, space bending in random directions, energy flowing in ways that violated the laws of physics. But Kate could see the order hidden within the apparent madness. The distortions are not random, she said, pointing to specific areas on the display. They follow patterns based on quantum field fluctuations. If I can predict the patterns, I can find safe passages through the distorted space. Science Officer Velanash joined them at the tactical display. Kate, even if you are correct about the patterns, how do you propose to guide 3,000 ships simultaneously? Our communication systems will not function properly in twisted space-time. Kate smiled for the first time since the battle had begun. I will not need to communicate with them directly. If I can find the right path through the distortions, the other ships will be able to follow the quantum wake from the Horizon's passage. Admiral Thorne studied the tactical situation. The Coalition fleet was already taking casualties as some ships ventured too close to the reality distortion fields. If they continued with conventional tactics, they would be destroyed without ever getting close enough to fight back. What do you need from us? He asked Kate. Kate returned to the pilot station and began configuring the quantum navigation system. For manual control, I need you to trust me completely. What I'm about to do will look like I'm flying us directly into their most dangerous world ship. The path I take will seem impossible, and the ship will experience stresses that our instruments cannot measure. She looked up at Admiral Thorne. But if you trust me, I can end this war today. The Coalition fleet began its attack run toward the Devourer Armada. As the ships approached the reality distortion fields, exactly what Kate had predicted began to happen. Pilots became disoriented as their instruments showed contradictory readings. Some ships started flying in circles as their navigation computers failed completely. Others simply stopped moving as their crews became paralyzed by the impossible geometry surrounding them. But the Horizon continued forward. Kate piloted the massive flagship through the twisted spacetime like she was following a familiar road. Her hands moved over the quantum navigation controls in smooth, confident motions. The ship rolled and turned through dimensions that had no names, following paths that existed only in Kate's enhanced perception. Behind the Horizon, other Coalition ships began to follow. They could not see the safe passages that Kate was using, but they could detect the quantum disturbances left by the flagship's passage. Like ancient sailors following a lighthouse through dangerous waters, the fleet formed a long line behind Kate's ship. "This is impossible," whispered the navigation officer as he watched the tactical display. "She is leading us through 11-dimensional space using nothing but visual navigation." The horizon emerged from the reality distortion field in the exact center of the Devourer formation. Around them, the enemy world ships loomed like dark planets, their surfaces covered with weapons that could destroy entire solar systems. But Kate had brought the Coalition fleet to the one place the Devourers had never expected an attack, inside their own defensive perimeter. "All ships, this is Admiral Thorne," came the announcement over the fleet communication system. "We are in position for close-range assault. All weapons, fire at will." The battle that followed was unlike anything in galactic history. Coalition ships fired their most powerful weapons at point-blank range into the Devourer world ships. The enemy tried to activate their reality distortion fields, but Kate was already moving the horizon through the spaces between dimensions, leading the fleet away from danger before the distortions could take effect. For 20 minutes, Kate flew the flagship and its escorts through a maze of enemy fire, twisted space-time, and dimensional anomalies. She found safe passages where none should have existed, avoided weapons that fired through folded space, and kept the Coalition fleet intact while they systematically destroyed the Devourer command vessels when the largest world ship finally exploded in a burst of collapsing dimensions. The remaining Devourer fleet began to retreat toward the edge of the galaxy. The threat that had consumed 17 star systems was finally defeated. As the Coalition fleet regrouped after the battle, Kate sat quietly at the pilot station and watched the enemy ships disappear into the darkness between galaxies. Around her, the bridge crew celebrated their victory with cheers and congratulations. Admiral Thorne approached her station. "Kate, what you did today saved not just our fleet, but probably the entire galaxy. How did you know you could navigate through those reality distortions?" Kate looked up at him with tired eyes. "Admiral, you have been thinking about this wrong the entire time. You keep asking what makes me different from other humans, but that is not the right question." "What is the right question?" Kate stood up from the pilot chair and looked out at the stars through the main view screen. "The question is, what happens when you take a species that is already crazy enough to strap themselves to controlled explosions just for the joy of flying, and then give one of them the ability to see the universe as it really is?" She smiled. And for the first time since Admiral Thorne had met her, she looked like the hero she had always been. The answer is, they become exactly what the galaxy needs them to be. 3 weeks later, the Horizon returned to Earth carrying news of humanity's victory and Kate Bishop's impossible abilities. Scientists wanted to study her brain patterns. Military leaders wanted to recruit more pilots like her. Politicians wanted to use her story to promote human superiority in the galaxy, but Kate requested a transfer to the Coalition's Exploration Division, where she could spend her time mapping the uncharted regions of folded space and finding new paths between the stars. She wanted to explore the places that existed beyond normal dimensions, to chart courses through the impossible geometries that connected distant galaxies. Chief Engineer Rodriguez found her in her quarters on the day before her transfer, packing her few belongings into the same bag she had carried when she first joined the crew. "Kate, why are you leaving? You could have any position in the Coalition fleet. You could command your own ship, train other pilots, write your own orders." Kate folded one of her old barnstorming magazines and placed it carefully in her bag. "Chief, do you know what barnstorming was?" Rodriguez shook his head. It was flying for the pure joy of it. No destination, no mission, no purpose except to see what was beyond the next hill. My brother Pete and I used to fly across the American countryside just to experience the freedom of being in the air. She closed her bag and looked out the small window at the stars. "The Exploration Division is offering me a chance to do the same thing, but on a galactic scale. I can map new star systems, find passages through dimensions that no one has ever seen, chart courses to places that do not even have names yet. Rodriguez understood. You want to keep flying because that is what humans do, Kate nodded. That is what humans do. We explore, we adapt, and when the universe tries to tell us something is impossible, we prove it wrong. And sometimes, if we are very lucky, we do it so quietly that nobody notices until it is already too late to stop us. 6. Months later, reports began reaching Earth about a lone exploration ship mapping the galactic rim,